Hello, boys and girls. It's David. Now, it's been 6 years since Mekaku City Actors. We've been free from its chains for so long. What once destroyed us as a community is now something that we have been able to more or less put behind us. A lot of us were lost along the way, but we soldier on regardless, us of the Kagepro. But not too long ago, Jin returned from the darkness to give us a new anime, Kagerou Daze in a Daze. Retarded title. Now this new anime was some sort of crazy 4D weird theater experience. So for the longest we weren't really even sure if we were going to be getting a release of it, but sure enough, the BDs were eventually released, and now we have finally come to a point in which we can see it for ourselves and observe once more our children, our pride, the Mekakushidan on the big screen. Or a bigger screen than YouTube and Nico Nico anyway. So I just saw Kagerou Daze in a Daze. Let's talk about it. First thing! The animation really sucks. It seems that even though it's been, 6 years since Mekaku City Actors, we haven't really progressed much in terms of making the Kagepro project presentable. There's some really disgusting CG, particularly in the opening of this anime, and even throughout. There is a whole lot of very poor illustrations, not a whole lot of actual animation. It's very what you would come to expect from Mekaku City Actors. It is very much in that camp of storytelling, of animation and whatnot. The visual aesthetic just isn't very sharp. The faces have been sort of redesigned slightly. The eyes are very like trapezoidal and sharp. It all just has a very almost cheap quality to it. That's a very immediately striking about this fantastic little story of ours. That being said though, all the characters in the Mekakushidan have redesigns, and while a lot of them are just kind of different for the sake of being different, there are a couple that are pretty good. Namely, Momo and Mary, who both have these very cute, simple redesigns. Seto is wearing real clothes for once in his life. He's out of the jumpsuit and he's wearing freaking Attack on Titan pants. It's very interesting design choice. And speaking of pants, Keto finally learned how to put on pants. She doesn't look like an idiot anymore. It's pretty good. But talking about the actual story, it's a retelling of the same old tune that we've heard plenty of times before. In the manga, in the novels, in Mekaku City Actors. It's the story of the Don going to the mall, and when they're at the mall, it gets attacked by terrorists, and the Don has to come together and save the day. Difference with this is that it really only makes sense if you already know the story. It's only 22-23 minutes long. It's not a lot of time to tell a story, let alone the fact that it has every single member of the Mekakushidan. The story is altered so that Hibiya, Hiyori, and Konoha are all involved in this terrorist incident at the mall, where of course they were not in any previous timeline. Well, Konoha is in the manga 2 timeline, but that's its whole other thing. Like I said, the story isn't really trying to be a retelling or an adaptation in that regard anyway. That being said though, every member of the Mekakushidan, well, most members of the Mekakushidan anyway, get to use their eye ability. The only ones that really don't are NA, obviously. Hibiya and Hiyori are pre-Kagerou Daze in this, which is pretty interesting. They're both present, and they both do things for the plot. Well, plot. They do things in the short period of time. But all the other members of the Mekakushidan get a chance to at least show what their eye ability is. Even Seto, who we know is very against using his eye ability to begin with. And perhaps the most interesting thing about this little short experience, and this is, I should say, is a prequel to Mekaku City Reload. It is a reintroducing of the characters in the plot in this different way so that we can move on to the next anime, that is Mekaku City Reload, whenever the heck that actually becomes a real thing. But as I was saying, remember, the most interesting thing, and speaking of remembering, the most interesting thing about In a Daze is the ending, because at the very end, Shintaro's talking with NA on his phone about the whole mall experience, and for just a second, his eyes turn red. So, what this means, it could mean a couple things. With the existence of Mekaku City Reload, it's very... The status and the canonity of Mekaku City actors has been brought into question. The fact that this new anime exists, is it going to be overwriting Mekaku City actors? Is it another good end? Is it going to be a bad end? Everything's kind of up in the air now, but Shintaro having the red eyes seems to be indicating that his eye ability, the whole thing with Shintaro's eye ability from Mary and the recording eyes, is going to be making a return. At this point in the story, it wouldn't make sense for him to have Ayano's snake. After all, he just met the Mekakushi Don, so I can't really imagine it being anything else other than Shintaro getting his recording eyes that he had in Mekaku City Actors. But speaking of the actual plot of In a Daze, it's pretty standard fare. There are a couple differences from the tellings of this story that we've seen up until this point. Namely is that two things. First, and they go hand in hand. First is that there are many more terrorists. In most renditions, we only see like 5, something like that. But in this round, there are many. There's many, and the second thing that goes along with the fact that there's many more terrorists now is that each member of the Dawn is much more active. They have a much more active role in addressing the problems. Seto, our friend, is actually, this may be the most active he's ever been in the Kagepro project. He has his moments with Kano, but he's actually there's a nice couple scenes in which Seto is carrying like a tripod and physically beating up terrorists. Along with Seto, Kido also gets some pretty bold moments. There's a second where Shintaro is distracting a terrorist and then Kido just comes and puts him in a headlock. It's almost a little out of character given that Kido's so frightenable. Frightenable. Very frightenable. But but on the other hand, it is quite good that we get to see the members of the Mekakushi Dawn, at least in this regard, especially with Seto, being a little more involved in the telling of the narrative. That being said, and while I mentioned that every member of the Mekakushi Dawn has an active role in the plot, or I should really just say that they are there. Konoha doesn't really do much. Hibi and Hiyori do very little, but they are there. There's this gag that I think it's kind of a miss, in which NA sees Konoha. But NA's reaction to Konoha is very out of character from what at least we've come to expect from NA. She isn't really startled the way she is in most timelines, or even upset as we know she is in the manga timeline, where she calls him a faker. Instead, she's just it's just a short gag where she's like, huh? Hey? Oh, it's you. And Konoha, of course, is just like, oh. So it's just a little gag, but it kind of it cheapened the moment a little. It cheapened what is a very important moment in a lot of the tellings of the story, and that's, the reuniting of Takeda and Haruka. That being said, there is another subtle moment in which Konoha meets Shintaro. And unlike with Takane and Konoha, there is a moment where Konoha looks at Shintaro, and he's kind of, for a second, he's taken aback. As if something might be, surfacing in his memory, but of course his memory isn't there, so there isn't much he can do. But that was a nice little moment between the two friends meeting again, even if Takane kind of got cucked. There was also a confusing moment with Mary. So they replicate the scene from the anime and the scene from the manga, in which Momo uses her attracting eyes so everyone looks at her, but Mary is next to her, and then Mary uses her eye ability to freeze everyone. It's a neat little, it's a neat idea. I appreciate it in the tellings of the story thus. But they do this weird take on it in which Mary and Momo are on a screen. The terrorists are looking at her on a screen. This is after NA takes control of the system and, you know, can do whatever. So the terrorists are looking at a picture, you know, a digital picture of Mary and Momo, but their eye abilities still work. I guess with Momo, it's a bit more understandable. We do have that scene in Mekaku City Actors in which she uses her eye ability on like a large area, even of people that she is not looking at, obviously. And we do know that Momo's eye ability kind of doesn't need eye contact to begin with, but everyone looks at this screen that has Mary on it, and they still freeze. That was pretty odd. What are the implications of that? Like, are pictures of the eyes all it takes now? Can everyone like look at can Seto see a screen that just has a ton of people on it and read all of their minds at once? I mean, I guess the mechanics of the eye abilities have never been too set in stone, but this certainly came off as a little cheap. But on the other hand, we did have a cool use of an eye ability, and that was with our good friend Kano. Kano used his deceiving eyes to make himself look like a terrorist, and that was one of the ways they had an in negotiations. The eye abilities in general sometimes are a little funky. There's a moment in which Kido, pretty early on, where Kido is trying to run away with, she has Momo in one hand and Mary in the other. And Mary accidentally like lets go of Kido's hand, and Kido's like, no! Oh no, Mary's gonna be seen! And of course Mary is seen and gets taken in by the terrorists. But, I mean, Kido, as we understand it, she doesn't need to touch you to make her eye ability work. Perhaps it's just because Mary tripped and Kido lost focus, but the fact that allows Mary to be seen was also a little weird. That's really about it, though. It was a short little movie. It's only 22 minutes long, and there aren't a lot of talking points. Namely, it's just Shintaro's eyes, which are very weird, and the fact that the Mekakushidan is a cohesive unit so early on. It makes me really wonder what Mekaku City Reload is going to be going towards, particularly with regard to Shintaro. Because in Mekaku City Actors, Shintaro's eye ability only kicks in like 3/4 of the way through the story, and it's not really spurred on by anything. I guess it's because he sees the picture of Ayano and with Kido, Kano, and Seto, and he has that little interaction with Mary. But if we get him using this eye ability, if it is indeed even the same eye ability, it could be different. It could be favoring eyes somehow. It's not very clear. We don't know how the histories of the characters may or not be different. Now that we have stuff like Manga 2, the precedent is really gone. But I'd imagine it's going to be something similar. And seeing how those variables are played with is interesting. Perhaps even more interesting than Shintaro, for me personally, is the involvement of Hibiya and Hiyori so early on in the plot. And before Kagerou Daze, neither Hibiya nor Hiyori, because Hiyori has the eye ability in Manga 2, neither Hibiya nor Hiyori have their clairvoyant eyes because they haven't been involved in Kagerou Daze yet. And a big part of why Kagerou Daze was able to happen was because they were estranged. They didn't know anyone, they were just this own little unit. So them being involved in the Mekakushidan so early on really begs the question of, is Kagerou Daze even going to happen? And if it does, is it going to happen the same? Could it be Hiyori this time, like it is in Manga 2? Could they both somehow be saved? It's all up in the air, and it's quite interesting. Opening the doors to the story of the Kagero project is exciting. In a Daze is not particularly good or remarkable. Like I said, it looks like a trash fire, and I mean, it's just a fun little thing retelling the same story we've heard countless times. But the prospects that it invites, and the fact that we get to see these slightly different variables. It would be very different if it was just a standard retelling of the narrative that like I've said, we've seen plenty of times. But the fact that Hibiya and Hiyori and Konoha are all there, the fact that Shintaro is tapping into his eye ability. Those are all fascinating things, and even though Mekaku City Actors was, of course, quite a disappointment, and even though this anime is not looking very good, to be perfectly honest, I do have prospects and I am excited for Mekaku City Reload, which I guess was the entire point of this anime. Oh yeah, it ends with a bomb going off. Shintaro is walking away with the Mekakushidan, and the camera just kind of pans down, underground, underneath the mall. There's a bomb. It blows up right underneath the Mekakushidan. So, who put the bomb there? Was it the terrorists? I don't see why they would do that. I don't know who else it could be. I guess it could be the Clearing Eyes, though I don't know why I'd do that either. So, there's another thing that's going to be leading into Mekaku City Actors that we'll have to keep an eye out for. So long story short, Jin, still a god, even if his storytelling is still a little questionable. I have high hopes. I want to believe that the story of the children can one day reach a proper conclusion. Still waiting on Summertime Reload. Alrighty, kiddos. So everyone keep an eye out. Maybe one day before we die we'll get Mekaku City Reload. Wouldn't that be a crazy idea? Okie dokie. I'll catch y'all next time. Thank you.